Hey guys, welcome back to the next tutorial. So now we are going to start putting everything we've learned together. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about a few things. I'll be walking you through how to open and close or open and write to a file. And I'm going to teach you to do the method with the most efficient way. I will at a very high level go over a different way, but really I like using this other method, which we'll walk through. And then really I want to spend the bulk of this tutorial is on actually building a sentiment analyzer. And so what you see in front of you right here is this is just some sample product reviews. So I've made this up. These aren't actually real reviews left by anybody, but you'll get the picture when you use something like this. So each one of these lines is a specific review for product X, we'll call it. So the first person said, I had a great experience overall with this product. My thoughts are all positive and amazing. And then the second person said this statement. So each line represents a brand new product review. What we want to try doing out of this is once we start collecting all this kind of raw data, I want to be able to mine it. And what I want to do is I want to understand overall, was the customer happy or were they unsatisfied with their purchase? We're going to define a dictionary that allows us to pinpoint certain keywords that we're looking for, whether they be positive words or negative words. And what the program is going to do is it's going to sift through every single one of these lines and pull out any word that we've defined as a positive word versus any word that we've defined as a negative word. And at the end, what I want to understand is for every one of these lines, how many positive words were used, how many negative words were used, what was the net result, and overall, was this considered a positive or a negative experience? So we're going to build that right now. I just want to quickly show you a few different ways that you can open a file. So I've called this file called sampletext.txt. So it's actually sitting in the same folder. So I don't actually have to go and look for the path for this because it's sitting in the same folder. So to open a file, it's very straightforward in Python. You do something like f equals, and you use the word open, which is a keyword, and you can see a whole bunch of different things that open will accept as different arguments. The main one that we want to pass through, in quotes, is sampletext.txt. And then the next important argument you want to pass through is whether you want to read it, and that's what R is for, you want to write it, or you want to append it. And so the difference between all of these is reading is literally you just open the file and you read it. It's read access only. So we're going to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to say f is equal to open.sampletext and then this. And I forgot to open my bracket here. And then we're going to pass in a new variable called lines. And I'll just call that equal to f.read. So I'm going to type in f.read. And I just realized that should be txt, and then we're going to say print line. And what this is going to do is it's going to import line for line what is written in the text, which you'll see right here is the exact same thing. So that's as straightforward as it is to read a file. However, when you do this, you also have to execute another command called f.close at the end. And what that means is once I've gone ahead and opened the file, you want to be able to go back and clean things up and close the file at the end. And if you don't, you can start corrupting your data and things just may not work properly. And so to avoid some of this stuff, I actually like to use a different way of how to open a file, and that's using the with command. And it's very similar to above here. It's going to be something like with open, and then you just copy and paste all of this. So actually, really, I'm just going to copy and paste all of this here. And then instead of saying f equals, I'm going to say as f. And what that means is I've assigned this to open up f. And I've assigned it into this variable f. And then I can go ahead and execute something like print f.read. And you'll see it actually executes the exact same thing again. If I just go ahead and comment this one out. And with this, I don't have to do any kind of f close or anything of that matter. And when you typically find code on Python, whether it's on GitHub or whether you use Stack Overflow or whatever your choice is going to be, most of the people who write their code will actually use this convention instead. And I should also say that anything in this while loop, so make sure that any code you execute thereafter is all indented. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now, if I wanted to write a file, it's actually the same thing. I can say with open. And now what I'm going to do is this is going to be my destination file. So I can write something like with open sample2.txt. The only difference here is going to be that I'm going to use the write command. And I'm going to give this a name as well, and we can just call this as W or something like that. What you'll see me do quite often is I like to use the word F for file anyways, so I'll do something like FR for file read and something like FW for file write. And I can do the same thing here, so I can do something like make a duplicate of this file by doing something like fw.write, and that's how you write to a file. And then I would write something like fr.read. And what this basically means is that every single line that I'm reading, I'm going to be writing to this file called fw.write. So when we go ahead and execute this, it's going to give me 0 errors. And then when I go and try to find this, just give me 1 second here. So when I bring over my window over here, you're going to see a file here called sample2. And when I open that, it's literally a replica of sample text, which is sitting in the same file. So that's essentially how you read and write. And I'm extremely excited to talk about this. And so I've already developed some of this code in advance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste some of it over, but as I do it, I'm going to be explaining to you exactly what's happening. I'm going to do the exact same thing with this here, is where I'm going to say with open sample text, which is this document right here. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to set it as FR. I also want to write a document later on to the file name sample text product review analysis.txt, and I set that as FW. So now the next thing I'd want to understand is I want to know exactly all of the lines that are in my document. So if I go fr.readLines, let's just see what that prints out, because I want to be able to show you guys as I go down the code exactly what's happening. So what you see here right now is it's actually returning the first line, and that is because I've set this to fr.readLine. But if I change this to read lines, it's actually going to go ahead and iterate through every single one of those lines, and it's going to return it back to me as a type list. So if I wanted to validate that, I just write type. It's going to say, hey, listen, I put everything in a list for you, which is great, which is what we want anyways. So now we know exactly what lines is returning. It's returning a list, and every single list element is going to be one of these specific lines, or one of these reviews. We'll call it that way. Now what I want to do is I want to go and understand what are the positive words and the negative words that I want to measure against. So I've set a couple of random words as well, right? I said, let me go through this entire document and look line by line which reviewer has used either a positive word, which is great, happy, like, love, awesome, or amazing, or a negative word, horrible, bad, hate, boring, nasty, and disappointed. And I want to go line for line. So on every single one of these read lines, as it returns how many positives, comments were there, or positive words were there. I want to know how many negative words were there. I also want to know the net. So what I want to understand is how many are left, basically how many positive minus negatives. Is this overall, is this a good or a bad thing? And then overall sentiment. Is it going to be positive or is it going to be negative? And I want to understand that for each and every single one of these reviews. So line 2 will have the exact same makeup. And what that allows us to do is, you can imagine if you have product reviews that span 500-600 different lines, this is a very, very quick and easy way to do it. And there's so much more you can do with this afterwards as well. In a future tutorial, we'll talk about something called pandas, which is a data frame. And you can export this data into a data frame and even do more further analytics against it. But let's just go back to the basics right now. All right, so now that I know I have my negative words and my positive words, well, what do I want to do next? As you saw earlier, when I actually go ahead and print read lines, it's kind of a clunky way of getting back all this information. It has all these new line characters that I got to take out, and I want to actually append every single line to a list. But I want to clean it up. I want to make sure that the list looks a little bit more nicer than having all of these in here. So how would I go about doing that? Well, one of the things I'd want to do right off the bat is I'd want to go ahead and sort through this list, or I want to go ahead and loop through this list. And I wanted to bring this specific function in because I don't think we've talked about it before. I'm not going to really be using it further down in the code, but I can at least use it here to show you how it works. So I can see something like for index line in enumerate. So enumerate is the function that I wanted to talk to you about. And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking every single one of these different lines that were passed through, I'm putting it through this function called enumerate, which essentially breaks this down into a tuple for me, to the index and then to the line. So what it's actually returning for me when I look at this, it's going to say, all right, this is going to be your line, but on top of that, every one of these lines is going to have an index as well. And in some cases, the index can be important, especially if you want to use it in the code. I don't really use it, but I'm going to show you what this looks like anyways. So I can use something like print, index, and then line. And so what it's going to print is it's going to print each and every one of these lines, but it's also going to print the index next to it. And remember, an index always starts at 0. I can always take this index and fudge with it and say, I want to make it a line number. I just add 1 to it. And I can do something like and say, this is the first line, second line, third line, fourth, and so forth. I just wanted to show you that. I'm not going to be using it too much moving forward, but I realized I didn't get a chance to teach this to you before, so I thought this would be a good time to do it. But otherwise, you can treat this as a regular for loop. So I'm going to go ahead and do something like define a new variable called line, and in line, I want to take this line here. So I'm returning back the line. I want to lowercase everything, and the reason is in my actual product reviews, I have certain words that are capitalized, like I or my, or I may have something along the lines here that are capitalized. I just want to make everything in lowercase so that when I actually match a word here, it matches. Because if I have amazing in lowercase here and amazing in uppercase here, it's not going to work. So that's the reason why we use the lower command. And then the next thing I want to return is something called strip. And strip basically takes out any new line character. So I want to make sure that that \n is gone and it's nice and clean. And I can now return that to my newly created list here, .append. And all I'm doing is I'm iterating through this statement here saying take every single line, strip out the new line character, make it lowercase, and then put it back into a list essentially. So if I were to go ahead, print this, it'll give you something like we saw before, except it removes the new line character. As you see, before it doesn't have the \n anymore, and everything's in lowercase. And that's what we wanted. We just wanted to clean it up a little bit. All right, so we're actually getting there. We're starting to pre-process some of the data. So the next thing we want to do is, all right, now that I have all this information, I have this list down here. And let me just make this a little bit bigger so we can all see this. I have this list down here, and then I've got essentially this code, block of code that will go in and pre-process some of this data and clean it up. Now I want to say, how do I start using my positive words and seeing if the word great is actually within the first sentence, which it is, so it should return something back, or happy or bad, or anything along those lines. How do we start doing some of that? So it's actually not too difficult. First things first, what I want to do is every single time one of these words fall into my sentence, I want to be able to count it. Because I want to be able to say there's 10 positive words, 5 positive words, and whatnot. And anytime you start a counter in Python, you would always go ahead and first start with something equal to 0. So I'm going to say my positive count is equal to 0. Then I'm going to go in and say for p, for positive words, in positive words. Basically, that means I'm incrementing through every single one of these individual words. Now, this is going to get a little tricky here, so follow along carefully. I'm going to say for I in ln_list, which is up here. And now I'm going to say k. And you're thinking, what the heck does that k mean and where is it coming from? So I'm going to explain that, I'm going to comment this out for a second. Let's say I wanted the first element, and that is just the first sentence within k. I can go ahead and say I'm going to pass in a 0, and that's going to return the first sentence. If I want the second sentence, it's going to go ahead and pass me the second sentence. And so to iterate through the sentences, you actually need to set up an iterator to call from this list. And the best way to do that is to just iterate through this using some word like k. So when k is 0, it's going to return the first one. When k is 1, it's going to return the second one, and so forth. So let's see what that means now. Which means that I also need to go up here somewhere, randomly. Let's pick a spot here, and we'll say k is equal to 0. All right, so now we've defined k. So what this is saying is, the first time we're going to go through this, set k is equal to 0. That means pull the first sentence out of this line. So let's go ahead and evaluate this. That's what it's saying. And so what the next sentence now is going to say if p in I. That means if one of these words exists in the first sentence, then do something. So what do we want it to do? We're going to say if p is equal to I, in I, we're going to say pos_count is plus or equal to. So bear with me, I'm going to explain what I'm doing in 1 second. So what I've said is okay, let's go and iterate through the list, which is this. Let's say it does pick up the word great. The first place where it's going to look for these items in the list is in the first iteration of our original lines. So that means this is the first iteration, or index 0, index 1, index 2, and so forth. And so it's saying go through line by line and search for that. Now, if one of these words actually sits in this sentence, what I want you to do is I want you to say, all right, so whatever line that was, I want you to go ahead and count in that line how many times one of these words existed in there. So I'm going to say that one more time. We're looking at sample text 1. I had a great expression here, this piece right here, and it's going in and it's saying how many times does the word great, happy, like, love, awesome, or amazing exist in this sentence. Whatever that number is, return it back to me as some kind of a counter. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this and do the exact same thing for the negative list. So this is the easy part when you just get to copy and paste code. My favorite. We're just going to change all the POS here to negative. So NEG. We'll change P to N for negative. We'll change this to negative words. We're going to change this iterator because we've already used it up here. Change this back to N, this back to J, and then literally I'm just flipping things around here. And so this is going to do the exact same thing now, where it's going to go and iterate through the list, and it's going to say how many times in a specific sentence or a specific review does one of the negative words live and does one of the positive words live. So it's going to go and say in the first sentence I have, and I'm making this up, 2 positive words, and in the first sentence I have 1 negative word or something like that. Now once we have that, we want to go and calculate something like a net score. And the net score is actually very straightforward. It's just saying, let me take a look at your positive count minus your negative count. Fairly straightforward stuff. Now, I want to actually say, it's great to know whether I'm a +1, +2, but when you want to set certain thresholds for yourself, as you go and mature into this practice, I'm just saying if it's greater or equal to 0, set it as positive, otherwise set it as negative. You may have scenarios where you want to go ahead and say, if it's more than 0.35, set it as neutral. If it's more than 0.5, set it as slightly positive, or whatever threshold you want to do in the future. And the calculation isn't always this simple. There's different ways you can calculate, what you would call a net score. I'm just taking the most basic approach here. But this is going to be, very indicative of how you would do it in practice anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and copy in my little code here. And straightforward code, if the net score is greater or equal to 0, set feedback is equal to positive, else it's equal to negative. And now let's put this all together. So I want to be able to print everything here, and I want to see how it actually comes out. Now to store this, I just want to store this in some kind of and I'm just randomly picking a dictionary. You can put it in whatever you want. You can choose whatever you want, but I'm picking a dictionary. Now I haven't defined L and E, and I'll define that in a second. But what it's going to do is it's going to take a look at K, which is 0, and I basically said start it off with line 1, because this is going to be your line number. Then I said the second one is going to be print the actual line. Then there's the positive count, the negative count, the net score, and then the overall sentiment. Okay, and to print line, you just need to go on one of these tabs here. So now to define the LNE piece, it's just going to be LNE is equal to .join, and we're going to join it on NLE_list. Okay, and so the reason why you need this is if I don't put this in, watch what happens. If I just set it equal to the variable and I hit print, and of course I need to hit print, you'll see that all the words here have all these spaces in between, so it doesn't really print out nicely. So you would just go in and type in space.join, and all this is saying is get rid of all of this stuff here, the comma, it's a word, and get rid of this exclamation mark. Separate those by a space, and that's it. And when you hit print, there you go. You got a nice, beautiful sentence back. And so if you want to return the sentence, that's what you would do with it. If you don't want to return the sentence, I generally don't. It's just a lot of text for me to go through. You can hit print, and you just get your line number, the number of positive comments, the number of negative comments, the net score, the sentiment. Overall sentiment is positive. So if we were to go ahead and look at and put this at the test, if I look at the first one, I know great and amazing belong to the positive words. So that's why I get a positive count of 2. There are no negative words, so I don't expect them. But if I were to look for one that has a negative sentiment, I hate this product, it just doesn't work. So line number 3 has 1 negative count, which is the word hate. And so at the end of the day, it has a net score of -1, so we rated a sentiment of negative. Now the last bit of code that I want to help you understand and show you, which is the reason why we put this with right function right up on the top and within the loop, is so that we can just follow this line down here if you have PyCharm, or if not, you can just follow the indentation. But now all you would have to do, if I want to copy this to this file here, sample, well, this whole thing here, I would just go down here and do something like fw.write, and fw, because remember that's what I defined it as, fw write,
And I'm going to say something like final, but watch what happens here. When I try to execute this, something funny is going to happen. So let's see what happens. It's going to say right argument must be a string, not a dictionary. And to fix that, it's quite simple. You just put in the string command, and there you go. So we'll open this up in a second. But the other thing I like to do, if I don't put what I'm about to show you right now afterwards, it just gets all mumbled up and everything. So after every single line prints in the text file, I wanted to actually also print a new line character so that I can see everything line by line cleanly. So when I hit print, there we go. So let me drag over this folder here. So I'm going to go to Reveal in Finder. We called it Sample Text Product Reviews Analysis and so forth. And so what we should have is essentially this output. So that file is sitting right here, and there you go. So let's go ahead, and we're going to delete this file right here. And I'm going to go back and add in line, just so we can see what that looks like. And so what it should now print out is everything including the lines, and there it comes. So when I look at it now, it has everything including the line as well. And so this is just the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with Python, guys. I mean, I wanted to help you understand how you can start importing some raw text files, how you can do a little bit of pre-processing, how you can mine certain data out of it. I mean, otherwise I'd have to sit there and read every single one of the comments and pick out what's a positive, what's a negative. And you're completely open to go and, modify this to put in whatever is more suitable for you. You could be looking at customer reviews. You could be looking at, speech sentiment. You could be looking at a whole bunch of different types of sentiment. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. Hopefully you learned something from here. You enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.